Keep your hands where I can see them. Don't you dare move. The click of his holster unsnapping echoed through the morning air as his Glock aimed directly at her temple. Denise Carter sat frozen, hands trembling above the steering wheel, her heart pounding with controlled fury beneath her calm exterior. Officer Kyle Brennan, badge barely 6 months old, stood with his chest puffed out and his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger, convinced he'd just caught someone dangerous. He had absolutely no idea that the woman he'd just threatened could end his entire career and expose a department-wide scandal with one single phone call. The morning of March 14th started like any other Tuesday for Denise Carter. Her alarm went off at 5:45 a.m. She showered, pressed her charcoal gray blazer, and brewed a cup of black coffee, no sugar, no cream. She'd been drinking it that way for 22 years, ever since her first week at Quantico when a senior instructor told her that real agents didn't have time for fancy drinks. Denise was 53 years old. A mother of 2 grown sons. A widow of 7 years. And a 15-year veteran of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, specializing in public corruption cases. She had put away dirty politicians, crooked judges, and more than a few law enforcement officers who thought their badges made them untouchable. Asterisk asterisk, but here's the thing about Denise Carter that most people didn't understand, asterisk asterisk. She didn't look like what most people expected when they heard FBI agent. She was a black woman. 5'6". Soft-spoken. She wore reading glasses and kept her graying locks pulled back in a neat bun. She drove a sensible silver Honda Accord, not a government-issued SUV. And that, as she would later testify, was exactly why Officer Kyle Brennan thought he could treat her the way he did. It was 7:15 a.m. when Denise merged onto Interstate 45, heading toward the FBI's Houston field office for an 8 o'clock briefing. Traffic was moderate. The sky was overcast. She had NPR playing softly on the radio, a story about municipal budget reform that she was only half listening to. She signaled before every lane change. She maintained exactly 62 miles per hour in a 65 zone. Her registration was current. Her license was valid. Her record was spotless. There was absolutely no reason for anyone to pull her over. And yet, at 7:22 a.m., she noticed the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. A Houston police cruiser. Coming up fast behind her. Denise frowned. She checked her speedometer again. 62. She glanced at her mirrors. Had she cut someone off? No. Had she failed to signal? No. She did what any law-abiding citizen would do. She put on her blinker, slowed down, and pulled onto the shoulder. The cruiser followed, parking about 15 feet behind her. Denise watched in her side mirror as the driver's door opened and a young white officer stepped out. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with a buzz cut and a walk that practically screamed, "I just graduated from the academy and I think I'm invincible." His hand was already resting on his holster before he even reached her window. If only she knew what was about to happen next. Denise rolled down her window calmly. "Good morning, officer," she said, keeping both hands visible on the steering wheel. "Can you tell me why you pulled me over?" He didn't answer her question. Instead, he leaned down, looked at her face, then scanned the interior of her car with obvious suspicion. "License and registration," he said flatly. "No good morning. No explanation. No courtesy." Denise took a slow breath. She'd been through this before. Not often, but enough times to know what was happening. "Officer, my license is in my purse on the passenger seat, and my registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now. Is that okay?" He didn't respond. Just stared at her. Denise moved slowly. Carefully. She reached toward her purse. "I said don't move." His gun was out of the holster before she could blink. The barrel was pointed directly at her face. Denise's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands flew back up to the steering wheel. "Officer, I was just reaching for my identification." "Shut up. Keep your hands where I can see them. Don't you dare move." His voice was high-pitched. Panicked. Aggressive. Denise looked into his eyes and saw something that made her blood run cold. He wasn't scared of her. He was excited. This young officer, with his shaking hands and his finger hovering near the trigger, was enjoying this. Be honest. What would you have done in this moment? Denise's training kicked in. She knew that arguing with an armed, agitated officer on the side of a highway was a good way to end up dead. She'd seen the case files. She'd studied the statistics. She knew that black women were 3 times more likely to be killed during traffic stops than white women. So she stayed calm. She kept her hands visible. And she spoke in the slow, measured tone she'd learned to use when de-escalating volatile situations. "Officer, I need you to listen to me very carefully," she said. "My name is Denise Carter. I am a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. My credentials are in my blazer pocket. I am not armed. I am not a threat to you." For a moment, something flickered across his face. Doubt? Recognition? Fear? But it disappeared just as quickly. "Yeah, right," he laughed, his gun still raised. "You FBI? In this car? Lady, you people always got a story. You people. The words hung in the air between them. Denise felt something shift inside her chest. A cold, quiet fury that she'd learned to bury deep over the years, because showing anger as a black woman in America, especially to a white man with a gun, could be a death sentence. But she didn't let it show. "I'm going to step out of the vehicle now," she said calmly. "Slowly. With my hands visible. And then I'm going to show you my credentials. Is that understood?" He sneered. "Out of the car. Now. And if you try anything." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Denise opened her car door slowly and stepped out onto the gravel shoulder of the highway. Cars whizzed past at 60 miles per hour. Some slowed down to look. A few people had their phones out. She stood with her hands raised, her blazer flapping in the wind, while Officer Kyle Brennan kept his weapon trained on her chest. "Turn around," he ordered. "Hands on the car." "Officer, if you would just let me show you my—" "I said turn around." Denise turned. She placed her palms flat on the warm hood of her Honda. She felt the cool morning air on her back, and then she felt his hands. Rough. Invasive. Unnecessary. He patted her down like she was a common criminal. He ran his hands along her sides, her hips, her legs. "My credentials are in my inside pocket," she said through clenched teeth. "Left side." He ignored her. Instead, he grabbed her wrists and pulled them behind her back. She heard the click of handcuffs. "Officer, this is a mistake. I am a federal agent. You are making a serious—" "Save it for the station," he snapped, shoving her toward his cruiser. But this was only the beginning. What Officer Kyle Brennan didn't realize was that he was being watched. Not just by the passing drivers. Not just by the people recording on their phones. But by 2 men in a black Chevrolet Suburban that had just pulled up behind his cruiser. Special Agents Marcus Webb and David Chen. Denise's colleagues from the Houston field office. They had been driving the same route to the same briefing when they spotted the traffic stop. At first, they almost didn't recognize her, until Marcus noticed the silver Honda. "Wait," he said, slowing down. Is that Denise?" David leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. "What the hell? Why is she in cuffs?" Marcus pulled the Suburban onto the shoulder and killed the engine. "Call the field office," he said, already opening his door. "Now." Officer Brennan was opening the back door of his cruiser when he heard footsteps on the gravel behind him. He spun around, one hand still gripping Denise's arm, the other reaching for his weapon. 2 men in dark suits were approaching. Both were tall. Both were calm. And both were holding up federal identification badges. "Officer," Marcus said, his voice like ice, "I need you to step away from that woman immediately." Brennan blinked. "Who the hell are you?" "Special Agent Marcus Webb, FBI. And that woman you just put in handcuffs?" "That's Special Agent Denise Carter. 15-year veteran. Lead investigator on federal corruption cases. And my direct supervisor." The color drained from Brennan's face. I didn't." David stepped forward, holding up his phone. "I've already contacted our field office. A supervisor is on the way. And I'd strongly recommend you holster your weapon before you make this any worse for yourself. Brennan looked down at the gun in his hand like he'd forgotten he was holding it. He holstered it quickly. But the damage was already done. Denise stood silent through the entire exchange. Marcus walked over and gently removed the handcuffs from her wrists. The metal had left red marks on her skin. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Denise didn't answer right away. She just looked at her wrists. Then at Brennan. Then at the highway full of passing cars. "I'm fine," she said finally. "But he won't be." And just when it seemed like the situation was under control. Within 30 minutes, the shoulder of Interstate 45 looked like a crime scene. 3 more FBI vehicles had arrived. 2 Houston police supervisors were on scene, a sergeant named Patterson and a lieutenant named Vance. Local news crews were setting up cameras across the median. And Officer Kyle Brennan was standing by his cruiser, looking like a man who had just watched his entire future collapse in front of him. Denise sat in the back of one of the FBI Suburbans, a bottle of water in her hand, giving her statement to an agent from Internal Affairs. "He pulled me over without cause," she said calmly. "He drew his weapon before I made any movement he could reasonably interpret as threatening. He refused to let me identify myself. He handcuffed me without probable cause. And he used language that suggested racial bias." The IA agent nodded, typing notes into his tablet. "You said he used the phrase 'you people.' Is that correct?" "Yes." "And in your professional opinion, Agent Carter, do you believe this stop was racially motivated?" Denise looked out the window at Brennan, who was now being questioned by his own supervisors. "Yes," she said. "I do." "Would you have stayed as calm as Denise? Or would you have lost your temper?" By noon, the story had hit local news. By 3 p.m., it was national. FBI agent detained at gunpoint by Houston rookie cop read the headline on CNN. "Black federal agent humiliated during traffic stop, video goes viral," declared MSNBC. And on social media, the hashtag #JusticeForDenise was already trending. But Denise wasn't interested in hashtags. She was interested in answers. Why had Brennan pulled her over? What made him think she was a threat? And most importantly, had he done this before? Because here's the part that changed everything. That evening, Denise sat in the office of Assistant Director Franklin Hayes, her direct superior at the Houston field office. Hayes was a tall, stern man in his 60s with salt and pepper hair and a reputation for being unshakable. He'd been with the Bureau for over 30 years, and he didn't suffer fools gladly. "I want you to take some time off," he said, sliding a folder across his desk. "Paid leave. A few weeks. Let the dust settle." Denise didn't touch the folder. "With all due respect, sir, I don't need time off. What I need is access to that officer's personnel file." Hayes raised an eyebrow. "That's HPD's jurisdiction. We can't just—" A Houston police officer drew his weapon on a federal agent without cause, Denise interrupted. "That makes it a federal matter. I want to know if this was an isolated incident or a pattern." Hayes studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "No, sir. I'm not." He leaned back in his chair. "Fine. I'll make some calls. But Denise, this has to be by the book. No cowboy stuff. No personal vendettas. Understood?" Denise nodded. But as she walked out of his office, she already knew that what she was about to uncover would go far beyond one rookie cop. The next morning, Denise arrived at the FBI field office at 6 a.m. Waiting for her in the conference room were Marcus, David, and a young analyst named Keisha Williams. Keisha was 28 years old, a tech genius who had joined the Bureau straight out of MIT. She had a talent for finding things that people didn't want found. "I pulled everything I could on Officer Kyle Brennan," Keisha said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "And honestly, this guy should never have been given a badge." Denise opened the folder. What she saw made her stomach turn. Kyle Brennan was 24 years old. He had graduated from the Houston Police Academy just 6 months earlier, barely squeaking by with the minimum required scores. During his training, He had received multiple warnings for excessive aggression during simulated arrests. One instructor had written in his evaluation, "Cadet Brennan demonstrates a troubling inability to de-escalate confrontational situations. Recommend additional training before field assignment." That recommendation had been ignored. But that wasn't the worst part. "Look at page 12, Keisha said quietly. Denise flipped to page 12. It was a list of traffic stops Brennan had made in his 6 months on the force. 47 stops total. 41 of them involved black drivers. Only 3 resulted in citations. None resulted in arrests. His profiling, Marcus said, his jaw tight. Pulling over black drivers for no reason, harassing them, then letting them go without any documentation. "But there's more," Keisha said. She pulled up something on her laptop. "I ran his bodycam footage through our system. Most of it's intact, but there are gaps. 16 stops where the footage cuts out mid-recording." "Equipment malfunction?" David asked. Keisha shook her head. "The metadata shows the camera was manually deactivated. Someone turned it off on purpose." Denise felt a chill run down her spine. "He's not just profiling," she said slowly. "He's covering it up. The question is he doing it alone?" Asterisk asterisk, but this was only the beginning of what they would uncover, asterisk asterisk. Over the next 2 weeks, Denise and her team did something that the Houston Police Department had failed to do. They actually listened to the community. They set up a tip line. They reached out to civil rights organizations. They partnered with local churches and community centers. And the calls started coming in. The first was from a woman named Angela Morris. Angela was a 58-year-old retired schoolteacher who lived in 3rd Ward. She had been pulled over by Officer Brennan 3 months earlier while driving home from her book club. "He said my tail light was out," Angela told Denise over the phone, her voice shaking. "But I had just had my car inspected 2 weeks before. Everything was fine." "What happened during the stop?" Denise asked. Angela was quiet for a moment. "He made me get out of the car. He searched my vehicle, took everything out of my purse, my glove compartment. He kept asking me where I was really going. Like I was lying. Like driving home at 9 p.m. was some kind of crime." "Did he find anything?" "Of course not. Because there was nothing to find. He let me go after 45 minutes with no ticket, no warning, nothing. Just a warning to stay out of trouble." Denise wrote down every word. The second call came from a man named Terrence Williams. Terrence was a 32-year-old accountant who had been stopped by Brennan while driving his daughter to daycare. "He said I matched the description of a suspect," Terrence said bitterly. "What description? A black man in a nice car? That's not a description, that's a stereotype." "Did he run your information?" "Yeah. And when it came back clean, he acted like he was disappointed. Like he wanted me to be guilty of something." "What would you have done if this happened to you? Drop a comment below." By the end of the 2 weeks, Denise had collected statements from 19 different people, all black, all stopped by Officer Brennan, all harassed without cause. But there was one statement that stood out from all the others. It came from a woman named Patricia Holloway. Patricia was 63 years old. A retired nurse. A grandmother of 4. And she had a story that would blow the entire case wide open. "It happened about 4 months ago," Patricia said, sitting across from Denise in a small conference room at the FBI field office. She was a small woman with silver hair and kind eyes, but those eyes were filled with pain. "I was driving home from my grandson's basketball game. It was about 8 p.m. Officer Brennan pulled me over on Westheimer Road. Said I was driving erratically." "Were you?" Patricia shook her head. "I've been driving for 45 years without a single accident. I was going exactly the speed limit." "What happened next?" Patricia's hands trembled. "He made me get out of the car. He said he smelled marijuana, which was ridiculous, because I've never touched drugs in my life. He searched my car for 20 minutes while I stood on the side of the road." She paused. "And then he found my purse." Denise leaned forward. "What was in your purse?" "About $300 in cash. I had just cashed my pension check that morning." Patricia's eyes filled with tears. He took it. He took all of it. Said it was suspicious and that I could file a claim if I wanted it back. But when I went to the station the next day, they said there was no record of my stop. No record of any money being seized. It was like it never happened. Denise felt a cold fury building in her chest. Did you file a complaint? I tried. But the officer at the desk, a young woman, she looked at me like I was crazy. She said if there was no record of the stop, there was nothing she could do. Patricia wiped her eyes. I thought about going to a lawyer. But I'm just a retired nurse on a fixed income. I couldn't afford it. So I let it go. She looked at Denise with a mixture of hope and despair. But I never forgot. And when I saw what he did to you on the news, I knew I had to say something. That evening, Denise called an emergency meeting with her team. We're not just dealing with one rogue cop, she said, pacing in front of the whiteboard. We're dealing with a systematic cover-up. She pointed to the board, where she had pinned photos, documents, and a web of red string connecting them all. Brennan has been pulling over black drivers for months, profiling, harassing, and in at least one case, stealing from them. But here's the thing, none of it is in the official records. Marcus frowned. How is that possible? Bodycam footage, dashcam, dispatch logs, there should be a paper trail. There should be, Denise agreed. But someone has been erasing it. She pulled up a series of documents on the screen. Keisha ran a forensic analysis on HPD's internal database. She found evidence that files related to Brennan's stops have been systematically deleted, and the deletions were authorized by someone with administrative access. A supervisor, David said quietly. Not just any supervisor. Denise clicked to the next slide. Lieutenant Daniel Vance. The same lieutenant who was at the scene when I was detained. The room went silent. Lieutenant Daniel Vance was a 20-year veteran of the Houston Police Department. He had a commendable service record, on paper. Multiple commendations. A reputation for being a cop's cop. He was well liked by his subordinates and trusted by his superiors. But beneath the surface, something was very wrong. Over the next 48 hours, Keisha dug deeper into the HPD database, and what she found was explosive. Vance had been Brennan's field training officer. He had personally signed off on Brennan's evaluation, ignoring the warnings from the academy about his aggressive tendencies. More importantly, Vance had administrative access to the bodycam and dashcam servers. And according to the metadata, he was the one who had been deleting the incriminating footage. Asterisk asterisk, but here's the part no one expected, asterisk asterisk. Vance wasn't acting alone. He was part of a network of officers within HPD, a group of about a dozen cops who had been systematically targeting black drivers, harassing them, and in some cases, seizing cash and valuables without any documentation. They called themselves the Cleaners. And they had been operating for nearly 3 years without anyone noticing, until Brennan made the mistake of pulling over Denise Carter. Denise presented her findings to Assistant Director Hayes on a Friday afternoon. Hayes listened in silence, his face growing darker with every word. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. This is bigger than I thought, he said quietly. Yes, sir. It is. You're talking about taking down a dozen officers. A lieutenant. Possibly more. This is going to be a political firestorm. Denise nodded. I know. But we have the evidence. We have the witnesses. And we have a duty to act. Hayes was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone. Get me the U.S. Attorney's office, he said. Tell them we have a civil rights case that's about to go federal. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind. The FBI, in coordination with the Department of Justice, executed simultaneous search warrants on the homes and offices of 12 Houston police officers, including Lieutenant Daniel Vance and Officer Kyle Brennan. They seized computers, phones, financial records, and over $200,000 in cash that had been hidden in safety deposit boxes, home safes, and in one case, buried in a backyard. Every penny of that money had been stolen from black drivers during illegal traffic stops. And the evidence was undeniable. Bodycam footage that had been thought deleted was recovered from backup servers. Dashcam videos showed officers planting evidence, fabricating probable cause, and using racial slurs. One video showed Brennan laughing after a stop, saying to his partner, "That's the third one today. These people never fight back." On the day of the arrests, Denise stood outside the federal courthouse and watched as Brennan was led out in handcuffs. For a moment, their eyes met. Denise didn't say anything. The trial lasted 4 months. In the end, 12 officers were convicted on charges ranging from civil rights violations to theft to obstruction of justice. Lieutenant Daniel Vance received the harshest sentence, 15 years in federal prison. Officer Kyle Brennan was sentenced to 8 years, and was permanently barred from ever working in law enforcement again. The day after the sentencing, Denise received a phone call from Patricia Holloway. "I saw it on the news," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. "They're giving back the money. All of it. To all the victims." Denise smiled. "That's right. Every penny. I don't know how to thank you, Agent Carter. You believed me when no one else would." Denise felt tears prick at her eyes. "You believed yourself first," she said. "That's what mattered." A few weeks later, Denise was invited to speak at a community event in 3rd Ward, the same neighborhood where so many of the victims lived. The church was packed. Hundreds of people, mostly black women over 50, filled the pews, the aisles, the doorways. Denise stood at the podium and looked out at their faces. She saw Angela Morris, the retired schoolteacher. She saw Terrence Williams, the accountant. She saw Patricia Holloway, the woman who had the courage to tell her story. And she saw something else in their eyes. Hope. "I didn't do this alone," Denise began. "I had a team. I had resources. I had a badge and a title that gave me access most people don't have." She paused. "But I also had something else. Something that every single person in this room has." She looked out at the crowd. "I had a choice. When that officer pointed his gun at me, I could have accepted it as just the way things are. I could have stayed quiet. I could have moved on with my life and told myself that fighting back wasn't worth the trouble." She shook her head. "But I didn't. Because staying silent has never protected us. Staying silent has never made us safer. Staying silent has only allowed people like Kyle Brennan and Daniel Vance to keep hurting us, again and again and again." The crowd murmured in agreement. What happened to me that morning on Interstate 45 was not unique. It's happened to thousands of black women, black mothers, black grandmothers, black professionals, all across this country. And most of the time, there's no one watching. No federal agents showing up to verify our credentials. No cameras to prove our innocence. She leaned into the microphone. "But that doesn't mean we're powerless. It means we have to be louder. We have to document